Imagine this. You're a man sitting silently at the dinner table, your eyes fixed on a flickering candle, not because you're captivated by the flame, but because it's easier to study fire than to explain your silence. The woman across from you, the one you love, notices the distance in your gaze, but she can't decipher it. She thinks you're angry, or maybe tired, or maybe just being cold. You're none of those. You're simply exhausted, not in your body, but in your soul. You want to say something, but what would you even say? That you feel invisible in the one place you're supposed to be seen. That your worth feels tied to how much you provide, how silent you remain, how little space you take up. You don't want to be dramatic. You don't want to make it about you, so you swallow it. Again, and she, not knowing any better, continues the conversation like nothing happened. She's not cruel, just unaware. Now zoom out. This isn't just one man at one table. It's millions. Different cities, different languages, same silence. Men sitting across from women they adore, carrying burdens they don't know how to name, wishing, begging silently for understanding. They don't believe they're allowed to ask for. Why? Because somewhere along the way, a strange cultural deal was made. Men would protect, provide, pursue, perform, and in exchange, they'd relinquish the right to be seen for who they truly are. You see it everywhere. In the friend who drinks too much but never talks about why. In the husband who shuts down when conflict arises. In the boyfriend who pulls away when he's most in pain. It's not indifference, it's exile. Emotional exile. And women, many of them kind, wise, loving, don't realize it. Not because they're incapable, but because no one ever showed them what a man's silence really means. But what if they knew? What if even just once the veil was pulled back? What if women could see not just what men do, but what they endure? What if they understood the 7 things most men are dying for them to know but will almost never say? Would the conversation change? Would the relationships deepen? Would the loneliness shrink? Here's the paradox. Men are often expected to be strong, but their strength is measured in how well they hide their weakness. They are told to be emotionally available, but punished when their emotions aren't clean, polite or easy to handle. They are called stoic when they are quiet, and toxic when they are honest. So men adapt. They trade honesty for harmony. They become agreeable where they once had opinions. They smile when they want to scream. They give affection when they are starving for it. And still, the world asks them to give more presence, more patience, more performance. But at what cost? That's the great question. What is the cost of this emotional invisibility? What happens when a generation of men lives in quiet desperation, their truths buried beneath jokes, distractions, and vague answers like, "I'm fine"? What does that do to a soul? To a relationship? To a society? And more urgently, what if this could change? What if there was a key, a way, for women to truly understand what's going on beneath the surface? Not to fix men, not to mother them, but to see them, really see them. Because make no mistake, this isn't about pity. It's about partnership. It's about piercing the illusion that men are emotional fortresses and realizing they are human landscapes, rich, complex, full of storms and stillness alike. But they've been taught to bury it. They've been taught that to be loved, they must first become less themselves. So they suppress. They smile when they're aching. They laugh when they're lost. They work longer hours hoping maybe success will quiet the pain. They chase validation in achievement, sex, status, but the hunger never ends. And yet every so often they whisper a quiet hope. Maybe she'll notice. Maybe she'll ask what I'm not saying. Maybe she'll understand, without me having to explain it all. That's why this matters. Because behind every silent man is a hidden message, and behind that message, a desperate hope that someone someday will hear what he's not saying. So before we explore what those 7 things are, let's pause here. Let the tension sit, let the question echo. Because if you've ever loved a man, your partner, your brother, your father, your friend, you need to know there is more to him than you've been told. There is more he's carrying than he will ever say. And now, it's time to hear it. Number 1, I want to be wanted, not just needed. There is a difference between being wanted and being needed. A man can build you a house, protect your safety, provide for your future, and still feel like a tool rather than a person. Many men have spent their lives being useful. Fix this, pay that, handle it, solve it. But what they truly crave, what they dare not say aloud, is to be desired. Not just physically, though that matters, but emotionally, spiritually, existentially. They want to be chosen, not out of obligation or convenience, but because you see them and still say, yes, you. A man who feels wanted becomes electric. He becomes creative, alive, devoted. But if he feels needed without being wanted, he starts to wither. He becomes silent, functional, slowly disappearing in plain sight. So ask yourself, not just do I love him, but do I show him that I want him when he's flawed, when he's tired, when he has nothing to offer but himself? Number 2, I feel more than I show. Men are often judged by how little they express. But what if silence wasn't emptiness but overflow? What if his quiet wasn't avoidance, but the only way he knows to keep the flood at bay? From a young age, boys are taught, don't cry, don't complain, don't be weak. So what do? They bury, they compress, they armor up. But the feelings don't vanish. They mutate. Anger becomes their only safe emotion because it's allowed, even respected. Sadness becomes sarcasm. Loneliness becomes distraction. Grief becomes isolation. But here's the truth, men feel deeply. The problem isn't lack of emotion, it's lack of permission. If you could see what's behind his silence, you'd find oceans, often stormy, rarely sailed. So don't assume he doesn't care just because he's quiet. Sometimes his silence is his scream. Number 3, compliments mean more than you know. You may not realize it, but most men live in a world that offers them very little praise. A woman might receive a compliment on her outfit, her hair, her presence, even from strangers. A man, by contrast, might go months, sometimes years, without hearing a genuine, heartfelt compliment, especially from the woman he loves. Men act tough. They'll act like they don't need it. But when you tell a man he looks good, when you praise how he handled something, when you acknowledge his growth, it hits him like lightning. It rewrites something deep in his bones. Because in that moment, he is not a function. He is seen. And here's the strange twist. The less often he hears it, the more powerful it becomes. Number 4, respect hits me deeper than love. You may love him with your whole heart, but if you don't respect him, he feels it. And it cuts deeper than you think. Because for many men, respect is the love language. Disrespect, especially when it comes in subtle forms like sarcasm, eye-rolling, nagging, dismissive tones, can feel like emotional death. Not because he's fragile, but because in his world, respect is tied to identity. Men are often taught that their worth is what they do, not who they are. So when their actions are met with contempt or correction, it feels like they are being erased. You don't have to agree with everything, but how you disagree matters. A man who feels respected will walk through fire for you. A man who feels dismissed will slowly withdraw until there's nothing left to save. Number 5, I'm not a mind reader. Here's a truth many men wish they could say without sounding insensitive. They don't understand your hints. Subtle cues, half-finished sentences, emotional puzzles. These often confuse men not because they don't care, but because they think differently. Men tend to be literal, direct processors. They want to solve problems, not guess their existence. So when a woman says, "I'm fine," but means "I'm hurt," he doesn't decode the message, he accepts it. When she expects him to just know what's wrong, he may feel like he's set up to fail. And here's the hidden pain. He wants to get it right. He wants to be there for you. He just doesn't know how unless you tell him. Clarity isn't cold, it's kindness. Number 6, my identity is fragile in ways you can't see. There's a quiet war going on in most men's heads, a war between who they are and who they're supposed to be. Society tells men, be strong, be confident, be dominant, be rich, be funny, be invulnerable, be desirable but not needy, be ambitious but not aggressive, be stoic but emotionally available. The result, a constant performance, a hidden identity crisis. So when a man fails at something, loses a job, can't afford something, feels inadequate in bed, it doesn't just feel like a mistake. It feels like failure as a man. And because this identity is so fragile, he often hides his struggles rather than risk humiliation. But when a woman says, "You're still enough even now," she does more than comfort him, she rescues him. Number 7, I'm afraid you'll stop seeing me. This is perhaps the deepest fear, unspoken, unacknowledged, but present in the shadows of nearly every male heart. What if one day she looks at me and doesn't see me anymore? What if the passion fades, the appreciation dies, the attention wanders? What if he becomes invisible, not just to the world, but to the woman he built his life around? It's not always jealousy or insecurity. Sometimes his possessiveness is just desperation in disguise. He doesn't want to control you. He just wants to matter. So when you look at him, not through him, when you say his name like it still means something, when you hold him like you remember who he is, you don't just calm his fear, you keep him alive. And now that you've seen what men secretly wish you knew, maybe you're wondering, why has all this been hidden for so long? Why do men bury their truths behind jokes, distractions, and emotional silence? What unseen forces made them this way? In the next section, we'll go deeper into the roots of this silence, the philosophical chains around the male soul, and the psychological war that men didn't choose, but now live within. Before we continue, if you found this powerful or eye-opening, make sure to subscribe, because the next part will not just explain what is happening, it'll reveal why, in ways that will change how you see men forever. There is a quiet prison many men live in, a prison with no bars, no locks, no chains, and yet the confinement is absolute. You see, the tragedy isn't that men won't express themselves. It's that somewhere along the path of growing up, they were taught not to, and worse, they were rewarded for it. A boy cries. He's told to be tough. A teenager speaks his insecurities. He's laughed at or ignored. A man reveals emotional need. He's called weak, needy, unmanly. So they adapt. They get the message. If you want to be accepted, you must first silence yourself. And in that silence, a mask is born. Psychologist Carl Jung once wrote, "The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself and others think one is." In other words, every man builds a mask, not to deceive, but to survive. It becomes armor. A smile when he's bleeding, a joke when he's lonely, a calm nod when he's falling apart inside. This mask becomes so natural, so automatic, that even he forgets it's not his face. But where does this begin? Let's go deeper. Society doesn't merely ask men to be strong. It defines their entire worth by their utility. From a young age, a man's value is measured by what he can do rather than who he is. Can you protect? Can you provide? Can you win? Can you conquer? And if you can't, what are you? Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher of pessimism, observed something brutal about the human condition. We are not loved for ourselves, but for what we represent to others. Men feel this more than most. They often aren't loved for their soul. They're loved for their stability, their usefulness, their ability to show up. Even in relationships, love can become conditional, tied to performance rather than presence. That's why when a man loses a job, or falters financially, or fails to meet expectations, it's not just disappointment he feels, it's existential erasure. He feels like he no longer exists in the eyes of the world. Jordan Peterson has spoken frequently about the crushing burden of responsibility that men carry and how the lack of purpose in modern society is causing men to collapse under silent suffering. But the roots go deeper still. Enter Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche, the fierce critic of morality and cultural illusion, argued that society creates false virtues that actually deny human nature. He believed that systems of control, religious, social, cultural, impose guilt and shame on natural instincts. Apply that to masculinity. The modern man is told to be vulnerable, but not too vulnerable. Strong but never aggressive. Driven but never controlling. Expressive but never fragile. It's an impossible paradox. So what do? They suppress, not just their pain, but their selves. They become hollow achievers. They show up, they check boxes, they perform, and inside they slowly die. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre describes something chilling. Man is condemned to be free, meaning we must choose our identity, but society punishes us for doing so authentically. Men feel this in their bones. If he chooses to be a nurturing father instead of a high-earning executive, he's judged. If he chooses to be an artist rather than a breadwinner, he's belittled. If he breaks down emotionally, he's told to man up. Freedom for men often comes with exile. This exile isn't always external. It happens in the soul. They exile parts of themselves just to stay acceptable. And then there's Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and existential psychologist. He wrote, "When a man can't find meaning, he distracts himself with pleasure. Look around. Endless scrolling, porn addiction, gaming marathons, alcohol, status chasing, affairs. Not because men are inherently shallow, but because they're starved of meaning, starved of spaces where they can be, not just perform. Because here's the ultimate truth hiding beneath it all. Men do not fear failure nearly as much as they fear insignificance. They don't mind working hard. They don't mind taking risks. But what they can't bear is to be invisible. To be just another replaceable cog in a machine that doesn't care whether they live or die as long as they keep functioning. And yet that's exactly how many men feel. Even in relationships, even in families, even in success. So when a man finally breaks down, when he finally says, "I don't know who I am anymore," it isn't a moment of weakness. It's a breakthrough. The mask is cracking. The soul is trying to come out. But here's the tragedy. Most men never get there. They suppress for so long the soul forgets how to speak. They become ghosts in their own lives. So when we talk about the 7 things men wish women knew, understand this. It's not just about small changes. It's not just about being a better partner. It's about resurrecting the man inside the man. It's about helping him recover the voice he buried in childhood, the truth he silenced in adolescence, the soul he locked away in adulthood. But to do that, We must first see the forces that buried him. Cultural conditioning, philosophical confusion, psychological repression, all have conspired to tell men, be silent or be alone. That's the war. And now that we've seen the enemy, now that we've felt the depth of the prison, the question becomes, what are the consequences of leaving this unseen? What happens to men, to relationships, to entire societies when this emotional exile continues unchecked? Because this is not just an individual issue, it's a cultural collapse in slow motion. It's fathers who never connect with their sons. It's partners who love each other but never feel seen. It's leaders who look strong but act from emptiness. The Up Next will reveal it all. The hidden consequences, the cracks in the surface, the reasons why ignoring this issue is no longer an option. Imagine a dam with the tiniest crack, barely visible, almost harmless. Now imagine decades go by. Seasons change. Pressure builds. Water swells. And one day, without warning, the entire structure collapses. Not because of a sudden storm, but because one addressed the invisible fracture. This is what happens inside a man. The cost of emotional silence doesn't explode all at once. It seeps, slowly, daily, silently, until one day he can't connect. He can't feel. He can't stay. The world sees the collapse, but it never notices the leak. We praise high-functioning men until they vanish. We admire their strength until it hardens. We envy their confidence until we realize it was compensation for pain. Here's the paradox. The very traits that make men appear fine are often the ones hiding the deepest fractures. Let's go inside the male brain for a moment. Neurologically, the male limbic system, the emotional center, is less connected to the verbal centers of the brain than in women. This biological wiring means that even when a man feels deeply, he may struggle to articulate it. He literally cannot always explain what's happening inside him. Now combine that with cultural shame around emotional expression. And the result? A man who doesn't just avoid talking, he doesn't know how. So he turns elsewhere, not because he's toxic, but because it's easier to be numb than it is to be misunderstood. And that numbness has consequences. Consequence number 1, the emotional shutdown. Men who chronically suppress their emotional reality begin to dissociate, not in a clinical way, but in an existential one. They become observers of their own lives, present but not connected, functioning but not alive. You'll see it in his eyes, that flat gaze when he's surrounded by people he loves, the hollow smile at a birthday party, the invisible wall between his body and his heart. And here's the cruel irony. The world keeps telling him to open up, while also punishing him when he tries. So he learns, silence is safer than truth. Consequence number 2, the collapse of intimacy. When a man loses touch with his inner world, intimacy becomes terrifying. Why? Because intimacy demands vulnerability, and vulnerability means exposure, risk, judgment. Men crave deep connection just like anyone else, but without a map to their emotions, they feel lost in relationships. They don't know how to meet the emotional needs of a partner when they've never been taught to meet their own. So they retreat, or lash out, or cheat, not out of lust, but out of longing for something real, something alive. And women are left confused. How can he say he loves me but feel so far away? Because he does love you, but he doesn't love himself enough to bring all of him to you. Consequence number 3, the generational curse. Boys don't learn how to be men through words. They learn by watching other men. Fathers, brothers, teachers, media figures. So when boys grow up in homes where their father was emotionally distant, absent or angry, they absorb the code. This is what manhood looks like. And they repeat it. They become the same shell, the same silence, the same storm. Not because they're cruel, but because they don't know any other way. Carl Jung once said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent." Many sons are carrying the emotional debts of fathers who never learned to feel. And unless the cycle is broken, they will pass that same burden on, quietly, inevitably. Consequence number 4. Societal decay in disguise. This isn't just about relationships. This is about society, civilization, the collective human experience. A society that teaches men to suppress rather than integrate becomes brittle, unstable, artificial. Because when men are disconnected from their emotions, they are also disconnected from their ethics, from their ability to empathize, to nurture, to self-regulate. And that shows up everywhere. In boardrooms led by emotionally numb executives, in politics fueled by ego and status games, in crime rooted in suppressed rage and unmet needs, in religious institutions that preach strength but deny sorrow. As Aldous Huxley warned in Brave New World, we have made the mistake of valuing comfort over consciousness, and we are paying the price. Not in revolution, but in quiet collapse. Consequence number 5, the identity implosion. Eventually the weight becomes too much. The mask can no longer hold, and the man, no matter how successful, admired or capable, starts to disintegrate. Some fall into addiction, some into isolation, some into depression so deep they no longer recognize themselves, and some tragically into the ultimate silent suicide. Globally, men die by suicide at rates significantly higher than women, not because men suffer more, but because they suffer in silence. They don't seek help. They don't believe they deserve help. They believe they are the problem. And so they vanish quietly, fatally, not with screams, with whispers. So what now? We have traced the path from silence to suffering, from boyhood repression to societal erosion. But here is the most important truth of all. None of this is inevitable. The damage can be reversed. The pattern can be broken. The silence can be shattered, but not with blame, not with shame, and not with force. It begins with seeing the man behind the mask, seeing the wound behind the wall, seeing that what looks like indifference may actually be despair. Only then, only there can healing begin. And healing isn't a loud process. It's quiet, like a man whispering his truth for the first time and realizing he wasn't meant to carry it alone. In the next and final part of this journey, we will arrive at the breakthrough, the ultimate truth that shifts the entire lens. We will uncover what every man longs for, but doesn't know how to ask. We will explore the insight that turns suffering into strength, silence into presence, and performance into purpose. Not through theory, but through truth. Are you ready for the final realization? The one that can change not only how you see men, but how you see yourself. You've walked through the silence. You've felt the weight of what's unspoken. You've seen how a man, any man, can carry the world and yet feel invisible inside it. Now we arrive at the place where pain transforms into possibility, not by escaping it, but by going straight through it. Because the greatest lie a man has ever believed is this: that to be loved he must first disappear, that he must strip away his softness, bury his fears, and replace his soul with steel. That love is earned through invulnerability, and value comes only through sacrifice. That if he breaks, he's no longer worthy. But the truth is something else entirely, something so powerful, so subversive, so liberating. It can rewrite the narrative not just for men, but for humanity. Here it is. A man's deepest power is not in how little he feels, but in how deeply he dares to feel without fear. True masculinity is not a performance. It's not a checklist. It's not domination, stoicism, or bravado. It is presence. It is groundedness. It is the courage to carry both strength and tenderness in the same breath and not apologize for either. A man's soul was never meant to be silenced. It was meant to sing. For too long we've confused the mask with the man. We've mistaken emotional suppression for discipline. We've called numbness maturity. We've labeled burnout as success. But what if the strongest men are not the ones who hide their humanity, but the ones who reveal it with dignity, the ones who cry without shame, who speak truth over pride, who say, "I'm scared not to be rescued, but to be real." Nietzsche said, "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star." Men are told to kill their chaos, but it's the chaos that gives them depth. It's the chaos that makes them human. The paradigm shift from performance to presence. Most men live their lives as though they're on stage, performing for approval they don't believe they deserve. But real love doesn't want the performance. It wants the person. The man who shows up raw, the man who holds space for pain, the man who listens to his own needs without labeling them as weakness. And this doesn't make him less masculine, it makes him whole. The same way a tree is no less strong because its roots are tangled. Presence is the new power, and the man who can sit in silence, in honesty, and openness without fleeing, is more dangerous, more grounded, and more attractive than any alpha caricature ever could be. The truth men must face and women must understand. Here's the existential twist. Most men aren't afraid of being seen. They're afraid that once they are seen, they will no longer be loved. So they hide. They keep the shadow locked away. They compartmentalize their hunger, their need, their chaos, afraid it makes them unworthy. But love, real love, begins where performance ends. And when a man is finally met as he is, not as he thinks he should be, he becomes free. Men do not need to be reinvented. They need to be remembered as beings of fire and softness, as warriors of meaning, not of destruction, as lovers of truth, even when that truth is trembling and raw. Viktor Frankl, who survived the unspeakable, wrote, "What is to give light must endure burning." A man who dares to feel, to question, to break and rebuild, he gives light, not because he's perfect, but because he's present, awake, unmasked, whole. To the men listening, this is your permission. You are not too much. You are not too broken. You are not too emotional. You are not too quiet. You are not too soft. You are not too intense. You are not too anything to be loved. Your emotions are not liabilities. They are lanterns. Your hunger for depth is not weakness. It is wisdom. Your ache to be seen, to be held, to be chosen without condition is not a flaw. It is sacred. You are allowed to want more than applause. You are allowed to want understanding. You are allowed to want love that meets your soul, not just your role. To the women who love them, see him, not for who you need him to be, not for who you expect him to be, but for who he is when he finally puts the mask down. And when he does, do not flinch. Do not run. Do not try to fix. Just witness. Your love can be the mirror that returns him to himself, not by rescuing him, but by recognizing him. Because the most radical thing a woman can say to a man is this: you don't have to earn my love by pretending you don't need it. Picture a man standing at the edge of a cliff, not because he wants to jump, but because he's searching for the horizon. He doesn't want escape. He wants meaning. He wants to remember who he was before the world told him who to be. And maybe, just maybe, if you stand beside him, not to push, not to pull, but to witness, he will no longer need the cliff. He'll find the horizon within. Now take a breath. Let everything settle. If something inside you shifted, if your heart feels a little heavier or a little freer, don't ignore that. Whether you're a man who needed this truth or someone who loves one, this was not just information. This was remembrance. And now the real question remains, what will you do with it? If this resonated deeply, subscribe. See you on the next video.